Today we're going to be talking about SMART goals. We often use very vague language. There's something in humans called similarity bias, which is the idea that I think that you know the things that I know and you think the same way that I do. And so oftentimes we ask people to do things and we just assume that they're going to understand what we mean by that, even though we use very vague language, because we assume that the way we want it done is the most obvious and logical way to do it. So, for example, here's an interaction where a man says, "Can you get everything ready for Friday's meeting?" And the woman says, "Sure." Neither of them know that when he says get everything ready for Friday's meeting, he means do a room reservation, make an agenda, send out all the calendar invites, and make sure it's done by end of day Wednesday so that everything's ready for Friday. She's thinking, oh, I got to do a PowerPoint deck, an audio-visual check, make handouts, and it just needs to be done before the meeting Friday afternoon. And so both of them think that they have an understanding, but they're actually thinking about two different things. And the point of SMART goals is to avoid these types of situations, to make sure that when you delegate your task to someone, that they understand specifically what you want. And also when you set goals for yourself, that you understand specifically what you're trying to achieve so you can make good decisions about where to put your time and your effort and your resources. I'll be honest, a lot of students don't like SMART goals. They find them kind of tedious or boring, and I absolutely get that. I absolutely understand that. The reason I'm teaching them, though, is they are just an incredibly fundamental skill. They are the fundamental management skill. Knowing how to set goals allows you to improve yourself. It allows you to coordinate activity with the people on your team. It allows you to delegate responsibility to other people in a very effective way. And you'll see if you take higher up leadership courses that goals become the foundation of entire systems of management, like objectives and key results and management by objectives. They're all goal driven. So I understand that they can be a little bit boring and a little bit tedious, but they're incredibly important. Today we're going to talk about SMART goals, and I'm sure you've heard of SMART goals before. Everyone has their own acronym for it, so I'm going to give you my favorite. S is for specific, M is for measurable, A is for ambitious, R is for relevant, and T is for time-bound. And for each of these characteristics of effective goals, we're going to have a little guest pop up and ask us some questions about it. So for specific, we're going to have an old-timey detective, and he's going to ask us who, what, and where. For measurable, we're going to have a scientist, and he's going to ask us how can we put a number on it. For ambitious, we're going to have a businesswoman, and she's going to ask us, is it challenging enough? For relevant, we're going to have a philosopher, and he's going to ask us why. And why? Why are we doing this? What's the point of the goal? And for time-bound, we're going to have death, and he's going to ask us when. When's it all going to be over? And together, by answering all these questions, we can make sure that our goal has the information it needs to be effective. We're going to start out by talking about specific, measurable, and relevant, because even though they don't go together on the acronym, they do go together conceptually. We'll start out with specific. Specific goals are clear and unambiguous. They avoid being vague or general. One of the most common goals we give people is just do your best, try harder, do better. And that's one of the least effective goals that you can give to someone or give to yourself. I play ukulele. Sometimes I'll be playing a song and I'll play it wrong, and I'll get to the end of the song and I'm like, okay, you played it wrong. How about next time you do your best, you play it right. Just try playing it right this time. And so I'll play the song again, and I'll make the exact same mistake at the exact same place, and I'll get really frustrated with myself. The problem is that telling myself to do it right is too vague. I need to focus in specifically on, what do I mean by right? Am I talking about getting all the notes correct? Am I talking about getting the tempo correct? What is it specifically that I need to focus on in the song? And when I say, okay, I'm going to play this through and I don't really care about the notes, I just want to make sure my tempo is constant throughout. That's what I'm most interested in. Then I can start improving on my tempo. Or I can say, I don't really care about the tempo, but I do care about making sure I get every note right. And the purpose of goals is to help focus attention. So when we're too vague with what we mean, we don't know where to focus our attention. It's only by being specific about exactly what we want that goals become useful, become a tool for helping us focus our attention. Specific goals provide information about who, what, and where. This is a real goal that I received from a student group. We will create a database of organizations. Now you can see this is an incredibly vague goal. If I were going to ask you to create a database of organizations, you'd have no idea where to begin. This probably made sense to them because they had some background with it, right? And so they look at this and it kind of makes sense to them, but they may not have fully fleshed out this idea either. They might have assumed that it meant something, and then when they tried to enact it, they didn't know exactly what they were trying to do, or different people on the team, most likely, probably had very different ideas about what this meant. So much too vague. We get our old-timey detective here, and he's going to ask us who. We will create a database of profit, not-for-profit, and government organizations. So that answers who is going to be in this database. Next, our old-timey detective is going to ask us what information is included in this database. And we can say email, physical address, and phone number. And then finally, old-timey detective is going to pop up and he's going to ask us where. Where are the organizations that we're interested in? And we're going to say in Marin. He could have also meant where are we going to create the database, and we can add in Excel. Look at that. Even by just going through this simple process, we've already made our goal so much more specific, so much less vague. And you can see just by looking at this, you would have such a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish if someone asked you to do this for them. So we've made our goal specific. The next thing we're going to do is make it measurable. And we got our scientist friend here. He's going to ask us, how can we put a number on it? How can we quantify it? Measurable goals provide quantitative criteria. And the reason we need quantitative criteria is we want to know when we've met our goal. We want to know how close we've gotten to our goal. And numbers help us do that. Some outcomes are easy to measure. Who is the best women's soccer team in the world? Obviously, that's the United States. There is a clear series of how to win points within a game and how many games you win, get you to the World Cup, and then a playoff system. And there's just like very intricate, very like quantifiable point-based system for deciding who's the best at things like sports. I like using soccer examples because I only have to update them every 4 years. Some outcomes are the opposite. Some outcomes are just impossible to put a number on. Something like attitude. If you've ever worked with someone who had a bad attitude and you're trying to like give them feedback or try to help them improve, how do you set a goal for improving attitude? You could say, oh, you have to say thank you 10 times a day. But even people that have attitude, they often say thank you. It's just the way they say it that's the attitude, right? So how do you take something like attitude, which is just so difficult to quantify, and assess quantitative goals to it? It's very difficult, and I would say this is the rule that usually we're dealing with issues of performance that are hard to quantify, not the exception. The exception is when it's easy to quantify things. So because so many things are so difficult to quantify, we often rely on something called a proxy measure. And a proxy measure is when I want to measure X, I'm interested in X, but X is hard to measure, so I'm going to measure Y instead. An example of this is points on your driving record, your DMV driving record. So insurance companies want to know whether you're a safe driver or not. So they look at your DMV points, which counts how many accidents you've had and how many speeding tickets you've had. That is a proxy measure for driving ability. And it's a pretty good one, a pretty accurate one. But it's not 100% accurate. You can be an amazing driver and live in San Francisco, and you're going to get in an accident occasionally just because it's a really difficult place to drive. You can be an absolutely horrible driver in Kansas, and you never get in an accident because there's nothing to hit. So it's still a proxy. It's still an estimate of driving ability, not driving ability per se. Well, why do they use it? What else are they going to do? Send a insurance agent out to drive around with you for a week and see what a good driver you are and rate your driving? It would be incredibly expensive, incredibly time consuming, and not any more accurate because you would drive differently with the insurance agent in your car than outside of it. So we're interested in driving ability. That's really, really hard to measure. So instead we count tickets and we count accidents as proxy measures. Even with things that seem very easily quantifiable, often the thing that we're interested in is not actually the thing that we quantify. So think of sales as like the perfect example of an easily quantifiable variable. I'm interested in your performance as a salesperson, so I measure how many sales, or I measure the value of your sales each time period, each quarter, whatever. And that would seem to be a pretty good measure of sales performance. And it is a pretty good measure, but it is not sales performance per se. There are things that affect your sales each month that are independent of you as a salesperson. Depending on what you're selling, the weather can influence it, the quality of the product, things that are going on in the market, economic downturns, the marketing of the product. So all of these things that you as a salesperson have zero control over get included in that measure of sales ability if we're just looking at sales. So even when things appear to be very easily quantifiable, often they really are a proxy measure for the thing that we're genuinely interested in. We basically have to use proxy measures. There are times when we just cannot measure the thing that we're actually interested in. The problem is that we start confusing the proxy measure for the thing that we're actually interested in. Let me give you an example of this. When police start wearing body cameras, they've done a lot of studies, different police forces all over the United States. When police start wearing body cameras, reports of police abuse drop, complaints of police abuse drop. Now, if you ask civil rights activists why this is happening, they say, look, these cops were going around smacking people up, and then they had to wear body cameras. They know they're being recorded, and so because they know they're being recorded, they've quit abusing people. Police unions make the opposite argument. They say, whoa, we were never abusing people. We have always been model police people, police officers. And now that we're wearing body cameras, people aren't making fake complaints. It was always just made up fake complaints about abuse. And now because people know there's an objective recording, they're not making these fake complaints anymore. Which one of those theories or which one of those explanations is correct? We don't know. You probably think one is more correct than the other, but actually you have no basis for saying that, right? And the issue for that is because we are interested in police abuse. That's the thing we want to measure. But the thing we actually measured is complaints of abuse. So the only thing we can say is that when police start wearing body cameras, complaints of abuse drop. We don't know if abuse itself actually drops. So you can see how easy it is to confuse the thing we're really interested in with the way that we measure it. And you need to be so careful about this because once you start measuring something, it just is such a powerful force of human behavior that if we know that is the thing being measured, we will chase after that thing, whatever it is. An example of this is I used to just laugh. I'd see my colleagues pacing around the room during committee meetings and stuff, trying to get their 10,000 paces on their Fitbit for the day, and it just seemed so hilarious to me. And then I got a Fitbit and I was like, whoa, I gotta get my 10,000, I want to see the cool animation at the end, or whatever it is. And so that is just human psychology right there, that if I put a band on your wrist that has numbers that go up for a specific behavior, you will start doing that behavior over and over again. So you have to be very careful about which proxy measure you choose, because however you measure things, that's what's defining human behavior. Let me give you an example of how this can go wrong. If you've ever seen The Wire, they talk about juking the stats. And what they mean by that is you get a new mayor that comes into office and they want to show that crime is down during their first quarter. So they lean really hard on the police chief. The problem is that we don't actually measure crime. We measure arrests. And so what the police chief will do to make it appear as if crime has gone down is that they will pull back on arrests, and they'll take things that could be either a felony or a misdemeanor, and they'll give people misdemeanors for it. So if you get in a bar fight, that should be assault and battery, which is a felony, a violent crime. But you can also give someone a misdemeanor disturbing the peace citation. And so to make it appear as if crime has gone down, they'll start giving out misdemeanors instead of felonies. And when you look at the statistics, you're like, oh, wow, violent crime, assault and battery, those things have all gone down this quarter. But it's not because the actual crime has gone down. It's because arrests have gone down, which is the exact opposite of what you're actually trying to achieve. So you have to be so careful about what you choose to measure, because that's what people pursue. And if you're not careful about it, you can actually wind up encouraging people to do the exact opposite behavior of what you want. All right, so we have our goal here, and we've got our scientist, and he says, how do we put a number on it? This is one of those goals that's really easy to put a number on. So we'll just say 10 profit, 10 not-for-profit, and 10 government organizations. And now this is quantifiable, it's measurable. We've talked about making goals specific by asking who, what, where, making goals measurable by asking how we can put a number on it. Next, we're going to talk about making goals relevant. And to make sure our goals are relevant, we're going to ask why. Relevant goals actually contribute to accomplishing meaningful work. I know that seems obvious. Why would we set goals that aren't relevant? But we do this all the time. Let me give you an example. Say I've got a research paper to write. I don't want to start it. It's like hanging over my head. I'm dreading it. But I get my laptop set up, grab a cup of coffee, sit down at my desk. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do some work on this paper now. And I look around and my apartment's a mess, and I'm like, I can't work on this paper in this mess. It's too chaotic. It's distracting me. So the first thing I have to do to write this paper is clean my apartment. And then I spend 2 hours cleaning my apartment, and I don't do any work on the paper. That's called the activity trap. We often mistake activity for productivity. And especially when we're anxious, when we're stressed out about something, we want to be working. We want to feel as if we've accomplished something. And so we will do any work that comes before us, whether or not it's actually helping us accomplish our goals or not. Again, I know this seems really stupid and obvious, like why would we do this? But organizations make this mistake all the time. So in 2016, the Warriors set the record for the most regular season wins in the NBA. I think it was, like 73-9, 76-9, something like that. But it was insane. They won the most regular season games. And then they went on to lose the finals. And one of the reasons people think they lost the finals is that they were tired from the regular season. They were dealing with injuries. They weren't at their best. What happened was they got confused about what their goal was. And they got so obsessed with this goal of winning the most regular season games and setting a record there that they lost sight of their bigger goal, which was actually to win the championships. And they actually worked against themselves. They undermined their ability to be successful in the finals by putting so much effort into this other goal. So I know it seems really stupid, but we do this all the time. We put effort into the wrong thing. The reason we want to include the why when we describe our goal is because that no matter what, whether you're enacting this goal or other people are enacting this goal, there's going to be times when they have to use their own discretion. There's going to be a decision that they have to make. By letting them know why we're doing this thing, what our greater plan or desire is, it gives them the information they need to make that judgment call, to make that decision. Which of these will help us best accomplish our overall goal, our long-term goal, our bigger goal? And so it's really important to incorporate that why so that people understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they can use their discretion, they can use their judgment. So here's our goal again. We've got our philosopher. Why are we doing this? And we're doing it to target the organizations for marketing survey response. Okay, so that's why we need this information. We're going to mail them or call them or whatever it is. We've covered goals being specific, which answers who, what, and where. Measurable, answering how can we put a number on it. Relevant, answering why are we doing this. Next, we're going to talk about making our goals ambitious. Is our goal challenging enough? Goals should be challenging but realistic. I'll explain to you why goals need to be ambitious or challenging but realistic. And the main purpose is that the ultimate purpose of goals is to increase effort. That the purpose of goals is that it increases people's effort in some direction. Now, say I want you guys to start putting more effort into fitness and being in better shape. And so I've decided to give you extra credit. And I'm going to give you 5 points of extra credit if you can run a 40-minute mile by the end of the semester. And I think by offering extra credit in this way, I'm going to encourage people to go out and train so that by the end of the year, they can run a 40-minute mile. Is that going to inspire anyone or motivate anyone to go work out? Probably not, because most people can already do a 40-minute mile. No problem. That's super easy. You can walk it, right? So it's not going to encourage you to go out and work on your fitness, which is what I want. Now, alternatively, say I'm going to give you 5 points of extra credit if you can run a 4-minute mile by the end of the semester. This is too hard. You're going to look at this and you're going to say, it doesn't matter how much I train. There's no way I can physically run a 4-minute mile. Maybe some of you can. That'd be impressive. I really will give you extra credit if you can do that. But this is so far beyond the reach of most people that they're not even going to put any effort into it. And so again, I've set the goal in a way that doesn't encourage effort. I've made it too hard and it doesn't inspire effort in people. Now, if I pick a good middle ground and I say I'll give you 5 points of extra credit if you can run a 7-minute and 30-second mile by the end of the semester, for some people that might be way too easy. They're already in good shape. They don't have to go out and start working out more because of that. For other people, maybe they're in bad shape or coming off an injury or something, and that's still too hard for them, impossible for them. But for most of my students, this would be difficult enough to get them to actually train, but not so difficult that they wouldn't be willing to put time into it. And that little Goldilocks area, that's what you're looking for, is making your goals ambitious enough to inspire effort, but not so ambitious that people give up without trying. Whether a goal is too challenging or not challenging enough is always going to be a judgment call. You can't perfectly predict someone's performance or someone's ability. So you're always making a judgment call in regard to, is this a little bit too hard or is this a little bit too easy? So should you err on the side of being too hard or should you err on the side of being too easy? It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're dealing with someone who's new, who's learning, and you're trying to build up confidence in that person, then err on the side of being too easy. We need a few successes under our belt. We need to build up that confidence before we can start getting out of our comfort zone and maybe failing a little bit more. So if you're dealing with someone that's insecure or not confident or self-conscious, then give them a few easy goals to help them build up that confidence. When I played football in high school, our coach would have us do a drill before each game called Feel Goods, where all you would do is just run out 10 yards and catch a pass. And you'd catch like 3 of those and you're like, man, I'm really on today. I can catch everything. It's because you're in an easy situation, right? But it creates this sense of confidence in you. So if you're dealing with someone new and self-conscious, err on the side of being too easy. If you're dealing with someone who is experienced, then err on the side of being too hard. Because if I set a running goal for you of a 10-minute mile and you have to work to get that and you end up working down to a 9-minute mile and beating our goal, that's good. But if I give you the goal for the 7-minute mile and you fail, you only make it to 8 minutes, you're still going faster, you've still performed better than if I'd given you a goal that was too easy. So to build confidence with people, give them easy goals. To push people, give them goals that are a little bit too challenging. Here's our goal. We will create an Excel database of 10 profit, 10 not-for-profit, and 10 government organizations, etc., etc. And here we have the businesswoman asking us, is this ambitious enough? And we say no, we can make it better. So we say 30 profit, 30 not-for-profit, and 30 government organizations. And now our goal is ambitious enough. We've covered making our goals specific by asking who, what, and where, measurable by asking how we can put a number on it, ambitious by asking is it challenging enough, relevant by asking why, and finally, We're going to make our goals time bound by asking when. When will we finish? Every day, you wake up with a to-do list that you will not complete. All of us have more things to do than we have time to do things. And so we tend to organize our to-do list based on two different dimensions: how important things are and how urgent they are, how soon it needs to be done. And because we are foolish humans, we often use urgency as a more powerful influence on our decision than importance. So in this list below, you see some things that are very important, some things are not. We tend to do the urgent things before we do the important things. So by putting a deadline on something, you are creating a sense of urgency in people, and that helps them prioritize their tasks. I almost always include a deadline in email subject lines to get people to respond to me. I'll say, can you do this for me by blah, 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 by whenever. It is such an effective way to get people to respond to your emails, because by putting that deadline on it, even if you don't really need it by a deadline, by putting that deadline on it, you're giving the other person the information they need to properly prioritize that task, to put it against all the other things they have to do and put it in its proper place. So it's a really useful tool to put deadlines on things. All right, here's Death popping up, and he asks us, when does this need to be done? And we'll say by January 1st at 5 p.m. Be very careful of when you put your deadline, because I could have just said January 1st, right? But if I say January 1st at 5 p.m., I'm going to get all of my databases at 4:59. If I just say January 1st, then I might not get them until 11:59. So be thoughtful about when you actually need things and be as specific and precise as possible with your deadline. Today we discuss goals, which are one of the most powerful ways to influence human behavior, most effective ways to increase performance. We talked about 5 characteristics of effective goals. They are specific, which answers who, what, where. They are measurable, and we have our scientist friend who's going to ask us, how can we put a number on it? They're ambitious, and we have our businesswoman who's going to ask us, is it challenging enough? We have relevant for R, and we have our philosopher friend who's going to ask us why. Why are we doing this? And then lastly, they are time-bound, and we have death, and he's going to ask us when. When is this going to be done? So by asking yourself these questions and then putting this information into the goals, you can make your goals more effective. Not all of this information is always going to be relevant. Sometimes maybe the what or the what is always going to be relevant, but sometimes maybe the who or the where is less relevant. But you still need to include that, because the more detail you have, the more you flesh it out, the more specific you can be, the better your goals will be at shaping effort. The ultimate test of a SMART goal is, if I give my SMART goal to 30 different people, am I going to get 30 versions of the same thing? Because that's what I want. I want every single person who reads my SMART goal to give me the same product, the same outcome. Now, certainly within some specific level of diversity, or there can be individual differences to a certain degree. There are some things that are allowed to fluctuate, but the core of what I want accomplished is the same across everyone that I give the goal to. The first thing you will notice about this, I've got our original goal at the beginning. We will create a database versus our goal, our SMART goal at the bottom. And the first thing you'll notice is the length, that SMART goals are just so much longer than vague or poorly written goals. And the reason for that, of course, is we have to put so much information in them. And so if you have a really short goal, if it's one sentence, one short sentence, it's probably not specific, measurable, ambitious, relevant, and time-bound enough. Lastly, we'll just briefly talk about the fact that there are 2 different types of goals. There are outcome-oriented goals and process-oriented goals. Outcome-oriented goals focus on a desired level of achievement. They focus on the outcome. So that would be something like, I will run a 7-minute and 30-second mile by January 1st. Process-oriented goals focus on how I'm going to get to that level of achievement. So maybe something like this. I will run 3 miles 3 times a week, decreasing my time by 10% each week between now and January 1st. So outcome-oriented goals are about what my ultimate level of performance are going to be. Process-oriented goals are about how I'm going to get there. When should you use which? If you're dealing with someone who has a ton of experience, who knows what they're doing, then use outcome-oriented goals. Say, hey, this is what I want. You go figure out how to do it, if you have confidence that they can do that. If you're dealing with someone who's lacking experience or doing a new task or who needs to learn, or someone that you're worried about their commitment level, whether they're actually going to do this thing, then you'll want to use process-oriented goals. And that way you can kind of check on them throughout the process so you don't get to December 31st and have someone trying to train to get their mile time down.